I was fortunate as a young boy to have an uncle and an aunt who lived on a 500-acre farm in rural New Brunswick, Canada. The farm was awash with chickens and rooster, pigs, cows, bulls, horses, as well as dogs and cats. As a suburban kid, I loved all this. I loved the openness, I loved the down-to-earth life, and I loved the freedom. I was allowed to drive a tractor, shoot a .22 caliber rifle out in the field, try a chaw of chewing tobacco, which I'll tell you is nastier and nastier. I wasn't allowed to do any of these things at my home. In addition to the surroundings of the rural culture, I loved the people. For instance, there was this older, retired fellow in his 80s who lived just down the road and was a friend of my uncle and aunt. And his name was Peter, and he lived with his wife in a tiny house which had no central heating and therefore was dependent upon a wood stove for heat. In addition, it had no running water either, which meant the lavatory, outhouse, that meant it was out of the house. And I got the biggest kick out of this, especially the Spiegel catalog and its repurposed use. Of course, I didn't have to get used to this in the middle of the night in the dead of winter, so to me the outhouse was fun. I didn't care. I loved Peter, who was this retired logger, not only because he was kind and gentle, but because he was a master storyteller. Just about every morning, he would amble his way up the road to our farmhouse for a visit. Often he'd walk in and he'd sit down in his favorite chair and he'd say something like, "Boys, oh boys, holy jumpin' oh beans, I'll tell you what." "What?" I would beseech. He had me hooked right there. He would then remove his sweat-stained brown fedora and say to my aunt, "Do you think I could get just a little bit of refreshment?" Which was code for a shot of single malt scotch. "So my mouth won't get dry," he said as I tell my story. And at this point, I'd be jumping out of my skin with anticipation. "What, Peter, what did you see?" And being the master storyteller that he was, he'd pause, he'd say, "Well, I'll tell you, I ain't never seen it in all my years of logging with my favorite team of horses. I ain't never seen anything like it, and I don't think I ever will." A man knew how to tell a story. And he knew that everyone likes to hear a story and will listen to good stories for great lengths of time. Life consists of stories. And by this, I don't mean that we all read stories or watch stories or hear stories, but rather that we live stories. Just where does the time go when we listen to stories? It's time beyond time. It's Kairos time versus Chronos time. In other words, it's time outside of time versus linear clock time. And thus it's time measured by quality, not quantity. Storytelling is the essence of a good sermon. No one falls asleep when listening to a good story. And have you ever noticed that a well-written short story is about the same length of a sermon, and yet one captures one attention and the other is better than Ambien? Thus this morning I'm going to tell you two, maybe more, but certainly two Easter stories. And the first story is a story which I heard on the TV show Rev, R-E-V, which is an English TV show featuring an Anglican priest who serves a struggling inner-city church in London. And the context is that the priest just heard one of the teachers of his church's school had been killed in a bicycle accident on his way to church. Now, knowing he must address the issue with the children, he goes to the elementary school to tell them. And this is what he says. "I want to tell you a story of a lot of little bugs who live at the bottom of the river. Every once in a while, one of the bugs would climb up a plant through the water to the light, and he'd never be seen again by any of his friends. Then one day, one special little bug wanted to climb up the plant too. So he did. He crawled up the plant, through the water, into the light, and when he did, he turned into a beautiful, amazingly colorful dragonfly. And he flew around the air, and he was the happiest he'd ever been. But when he tried to fly back down into the water to tell his bug friends how wonderful it was, he found out that he couldn't. He couldn't get down into the water anymore because he wasn't a bug anymore. He was a dragonfly. And this upset him until he remembered that one day all of his friends would crawl up that plant too and join him in the sun. That's a beautiful story. It's an Easter story which captures our attention and helps us understand the meaning of Easter better than rock, tomb, and scissors, which later became a children's game of selection. It tells us that our children have the greatest power on earth from which no one or nothing escapes is not the greatest power after all. It says that God extends life after physical death into something that is wonderful and beautiful and not fearful and ugly. And we know this because God gave new life to the dead Jesus, and thus it is and will be the same for each and every one of us. The second story is also a children's story. But like all children's stories, it really is more for us adults. This story is about a little girl whose parents can't be with one another anymore. In the world of children, none of this makes sense. In a child's world, you simply take Mr. Floppy and Bear Bear and put them next to you, one another on your bed, and there they stay until you move them. And so why can't that be the case for Mommy and Daddy? And when the day comes when Daddy's standing by the front door with suitcase in hand, but is not going on a trip, but going away, he bends down with a broken heart and holding back tears, hugs his little girl as if it is their last hug. And she clings to his neck and with tears running down her pink cheeks says through sniffles, "Don't go, don't go." And with one arm around her dad's neck, reaches out for her mom's arm in an attempt to bridge the gap, and bringing them together, but the arm of her mom is too far away. As her dad stands to go, she clutches onto his leg because to her, life is over. And inside of him, he kind of believes that that's the case too. Here in the foyer of their house, they stand at Good Friday. Everything is over. Jesus is dead. There is no future. There's no future until, paradoxically, someone opens the front door, the door to Easter. Because real life deaths, the ones which kill us and yet we are still alive, must have Easter life too, or else Easter Day and our faith is pretty much meaningless. We have to know that when we die and yet are still alive, that there is life after death, whether it is a result of divorce, or tragedy, an accident, or any other of the myriad deaths that each of us experience in our lives. Easter means that there's always new life out of the ashes of defeat and the shreds of lives torn apart. God promises this and promises never to leave us alone to face whatever deaths we face, physical or otherwise. And this is the reason all of you come here today, of all days. And if you get this message, then I don't give a mouse's bottom if you don't come back until Christmas because it means that you understand the core of Christian theology. I also don't care what you believe happened at the tomb of Jesus that early morning 2,000 years ago. Some say Jesus' body was actually physically resurrected. Some say the Romans took the body. Others say the disciples took the body. Some say them dry bones of Jesus' body are and have been exactly where they were put, in some jar in a cave in Jerusalem. In fact, a few years ago, in just such a cave, there was discovered a jar with the inscription on it, James, the brother of Jesus, which sent many a church official to the outhouse. Why? Because if James's bones were in a jar, then maybe Jesus's might be too. And then what does that do to our belief in the resurrection of the body? If Jesus' bones were discovered, would that mean that the resurrection never happened? And should that mean the end of Christianity? I don't know. Does it matter to you? Would it matter to your faith that Jesus' bones were unequivocally discovered? What if you don't believe that Jesus was physically resurrected? Can you be a Christian without believing that the tomb was really empty? What if you believe, as Bishop Spong, Episcopal bishop, and other scholars, that the resurrection was an awareness, a light bulb going off in the heads of the disciples, wherein they felt the very real presence of Jesus still with them and supporting them? That death doesn't end the relationship. And thus that the resurrection really means a transformation in one's life because of a new awareness of God in our lives in a creative, transformative way. Is this okay? My God, is it even okay to mention this on all days Easter when we have so many non-regular attenders whom we want to convince to stay in church? So I think it is. I think it's important to hear all the stories. And since I promised you more than 2 stories, here's another one with regards to divergent thoughts about Easter. A clergy friend of mine was a young priest in a large parish. On Easter Sunday, he was assigned to be with the elementary-aged children in Sunday school. As the teacher started the class, he took a seat among the children. The desks, of course, were designed for young children, thus he barely fit. He said he felt like Big Bird. After a brief telling of Jesus being raised from the tomb, each child was given crayons and a construction paper and instructed to draw what Easter meant. And next to him was this bright young girl who immediately set out to draw her scene. But instead of drawing an empty tomb or Jesus floating in the air, she proceeded to draw a bright sun in the sky, some trees, her dog, herself, what appeared to be a normal scene around her house or at a park. Walking around the class to see what the children were doing, the teacher came to this young girl, and upon seeing her sunny, normal day drawing, the teacher scolded her. This is not an Easter scene. Now put that aside and draw correctly. My friend said that the little girl hung her head in shame and started to cry. And then she crinkled up her Easter drawing for no one else ever to see. Is this what we want? What matters about Easter is not to believe in a set of statements, but what it means. Were you aware that the original meaning of the word to believe was to hold dear? And the Latin credo means I give my heart to. Now, heart does not simply refer to feelings or emotions, though those are involved. Rather, heart is a metaphor for the self at its deepest level, the level of the self beneath our thinking, willing, and feeling. To whom do you give your heart, yourself? To whom do you commit yourself? Whom do you hold dear? Whom do you trust? whom you beloved. Do you believe in me used to mean, do you beloved me? Today, to believe means to accept something as true or real. We define believe as in believing that something, a statement or statements are true with varying degrees of certainty. And this is that what the Sunday school teacher wanted. She wanted an illustration of particular religious statements about Jesus. But believing dogma or statements about God as known in Jesus don't transform us. This is not faith. Believing that statements about God are true have little transforming power. But holding God as known in Jesus dear in the core of yourself, your heart, has great transforming power. Thus, my Easter stories are not biblical. I'm not explaining the empty tomb to you. Perhaps I really am. For sure, I'm not sending you home today with scripture verses to memorize or a particular story to believe. Instead, I want to send you home today with an understanding in real life of what it means to trust that with God something is never over until it is over. In other words, Easter means it's not over until Kate Smith sings. And for those of you too young to know who Kate Smith was, this means that whatever we think we've come to an end, our wit's end, it's not the end. It's not the end because God is always beside us, supporting us, and offering us sweet chocolate and new life. The meaning of Easter is to trust God in this. This is what faith is. It's trust. Believe this meaning. Give your heart to it. Have faith. Have trust that you and all your loved ones are going to be dragonflies someday. And trust as you turn to go out the door in a divorce that God won't let your little girl cry alone or die that day. Trust, despite the unmitigated pain, that new life is at that very moment being created. Boys, oh boys, holy jumping oh beans, you should have seen what I just saw. I will tell you what. What? I saw that there ain't such a thing as death, said Peter. What? Why? Because of what I have just seen. What did you just see? What did you just see? Tell me, quick. Quick, I'm gonna wet my pants. Tell me, quick. You wanna know what I just saw? I just saw that he is risen. I just saw it in Sunday school, in a little girl's drawing. Amen.